after my mother told me that we would be leaving my father because he wasn't making any money, I went to my bedroom. And just to give you a bit of the layout of the house, so it was a very narrow hallway, and my bedroom would have been like here, and their bedroom would have been here. So kind of like this. This is how the doors would have worked. And they were pocket doors. So what I did was I went into my room, and the wall that is against the hallway is where I ended up sitting. And I remember walking into the room and sliding down the wall, waiting to see what was going to happen next. Terrified that we were leaving my father, my only security, the person that I love the most in this world. So I just sat there, and I literally didn't move until the time that I left the house. At 5:30, so now they got home at 2:30, right? Supposedly. He picked her up at 12:30. Let's do the timeline. Picked her up from the airport at 12:30. That 40-minute drive apparently brought them home at 2:30. I would have gotten home between 3:30 and 4. And by the way, just a little background. My father did not drink every day. Like, he wasn't a person who came home after work and unwound with a drink. He had type 2 diabetes, and he was conscious of that. He wasn't someone who was drunk very often. Like, if we all went out to dinner every now and again, he might get a little boozy, but he wasn't really someone who drank a lot. Also, he was very responsible and very fastidious, very tidy. So when he would get home from work, he would immediately change his clothes, hang them up. He invested in his suits. Like, he had very nice suits, and he respected the fact that he earned them and the money that he spent on them, and he took good care of his items. So for my father to be passed out on the bed in his suit pants, having not changed, is very strange and very unusual. And who takes a nap with their feet hanging over the bed and their face halfway buried into a pillow? The positioning of his body was completely off, and I never saw him lay in the middle of the bed. And sometimes he would be home when I got home from school, and ordinarily he'd be laying there watching the news, and I would go and cuddle up with him before doing my homework and that sort of thing. At 5:30, so 12:30 airport, 2:30 home, 2-hour ride home, 3:30 to 4, I get home. At 5:30, she attempts to wake him up, and she's unable to do so. She calls her father from the bedroom phone. So the bedroom phone is on the nightstand next to the bed. Why not call 911 at 5:30? If you can't wake this man up and he has threatened suicide, why wouldn't you call 911? At 6:10, approximately 40 minutes after that call to her father, she notices that my stepfather is turning blue, and she yells for my brother, who would have been 17, to call 911. I mean, she just put down the phone. The phone is next to my father. He's turning blue. She doesn't know CPR or anything like that. She doesn't pick up the phone and call 911. She screams for my brother. Let me tell you what really happened. I was there. My brother noticed my stepfather turning blue. I don't know why he went into the bedroom, but he noticed. He was the first person, because I heard my brother yelling to my mother, "He's turning blue. We need to call an ambulance. We need to call someone." And my mother started screaming at him that he's going to be fine, that he doesn't need to call the ambulance. My brother goes out of the bedroom into the kitchen, picks up the phone because he's going to call 911, and starts yelling at my mother to hang up the other phone because it's off the hook. It's got that busy tone going on, and he can't call 911. He runs back to the bedroom, puts that phone down, and goes back into the kitchen. I remember him hearing him kind of running around the house. Whether he called from the kitchen or not, or the bedroom, went back and forth, I don't know. But I know at that point he did run to the kitchen. He calls 911 and the paramedics get there pretty quickly. So this would have been 6:10. They probably got there within 10-minute period of time. We were really close to fire rescue. So that was like an easy thing to have happen, right? It wasn't like they got there 20 minutes early or late or whatever. In the police report, it states that the first police officer got the call at 6:28 and he arrived on the scene at 6:29, and that the paramedics were on site already working on my stepfather. When the paramedics got there, I could hear them. And at one point in time, they opened my door and I peered out. And I could see them working on my father and putting him on a gurney. And the reason that they opened my door was so that they could angle the gurney out and get it down the hallway. So they opened my door and I kind of peered out. My mother came and said, keep the door closed. And I went right back into the position I was in because I was terrified and I didn't know what was going on. She closed the door, they opened the door, she closed the door, they opened the door. This time when they opened the door, they didn't let her close it again, but there's no way they would have seen me in the bedroom because, again, my back was against the wall that was the hallway wall. They got my father out. My mother came in, told me, go outside, and got me out of the house very quickly while all this commotion was going on. And I can only assume that the police officer at this point in time, according to what he documented, was in the bedroom. So he would not have seen me walk out of the house. I walk out of the house, they've loaded him into the ambulance. He's got one of those machines, that pacemaker machine on him. He's still alive. And they take him away. And I have this vague memory of my grandfather being there telling me to go to my best friend's house. But I'm not really sure that he was there. Like, that part is a little foggy to me. I just feel like I remember seeing him and him doing that, but it could have been my mother telling me. And I want to be very accurate with what I tell you. So I have a vague memory of that. One way or the other, I did end up at my best friend's house. That night around 9:30, my grandfather called the house to check on me and told me that he might make it, that my stepfather might make it. So this was at 9:30 at night. My stepfather was already dead. I don't know why my grandfather did that. I think he did it so I wouldn't go home. I think he did it because maybe they were concerned the police would come back and question me. I don't know. These are my assumptions, right? So second detective is there at 7:30. And him and the other investigator are surveying the bedroom. They look for a suicide note and they don't find one. They find 2 empty pill vials and a small empty envelope that says take one at bedtime. The empty pill vials, one was the Oronase that I talked about in an earlier video that's taken for diabetes. My stepfather had type 2 diabetes, and it was dated April 22nd, 1975. So for those of you that didn't see the other video, my mother told the police that he developed type 2 diabetes after an assault that took place in 1976. Well, how is that possible if he was already being prescribed diabetes medication? I don't know why she lied about that, but again, if you lie about one thing, you lie about other things, and she would have known when he was diagnosed. There was also an empty bottle of diabetes, which is another medication for diabetes. The small empty envelope doesn't mark what was in there, and I do remember he used to have that envelope on his nightstand. I don't remember him taking anything out of it. I know it didn't have very much in it, like it was pretty flat. and it was just always there. So did he refill it in time to time and take it for sleep? I don't know. The investigator went to the hospital, and when he arrived there, he said that there were no marks or anything like that on my dad's body. There was no trauma to the outside of his body, and that his body was actually still warm. So when he arrived at the hospital, he was in critical condition, and whatever time frame that was, he had died shortly thereafter. And the thing about that is that my mother trying to delay my brother from calling 911, that 40-minute period in there, given that my stepfather did arrive at the hospital alive and his body was only warm, indicates that if 911 had been called at 5:30, maybe he would have survived. The autopsy report. This is where it gets really interesting. So, actually, I don't even need to look at it. I wanted to show it to you, but it's in the stack. There was no gin. There was no alcohol. They did a full tox in his system. There was no oronase, but there was an empty bottle. Whatever would have been in that little envelope wasn't in his system, unless what was in that envelope was diabetes. But why would that be in the envelope to take 2 at bedtime along with the prescription bottle? The only thing in my stepfather's system was the diabetes. And in doing a little bit of amateur research, because again, I'm not a doctor, diabetes is a really sensitive drug. And if you take too much of it, it will put you in a coma and you will die. Like, it's not something you would have to take a whole bottle of. I can't imagine if he had taken a whole bottle of it. It doesn't show in the autopsy report how many, how much was in there. And I have to think that there must be a more detailed autopsy report. And again, none of this would have been online. And I don't know what box in what basement or whatever these records are in. So if there's somebody out there in Miami who's willing to help me obtain the other records and the records from my father's, the first incident where he was beaten outside the nightclub, I would be very grateful. I want justice for my father. The police should have asked, why there weren't any other substances in his bloodstream. Like, they should have seen this report and questioned, well, where was the booze in his bloodstream? If he was walking around with this bottle of gin, which was half empty, by the way, at this point, that's what my mother displayed to me, why didn't they question that? Why didn't they say to her, well, you're having financial issues and he wasn't working. Where were you on vacation? How could you be on vacation? How could you afford that? There's no evidence that they asked this question. Why didn't you call 911? Why did you call your son to make that phone call? Why, when you couldn't wake him up at 5:30, did it take a full 40 minutes for 911 to be called? Why did you call your father? He picked you up at the airport at 12:30. Did you go straight home? Would you make any stops along the way? The airport is 40 minutes away. What happened to those 2 hours? Where were you? Why weren't they thinking it only took him 30 minutes to be passed out drunk? Because at that point, no way to know he took pills, right? How could he be passed out? She was gone for 22 minutes. How was he passed out in 22 minutes time, snoring loudly in this kind of position and space? After threatening suicide, if you came home and that person was passed out, wouldn't it alarm you? Wouldn't you think, oh, maybe he meant it? Let me try to wake him up now. Did they not notice there was another bedroom in the house directly across the way from my parents' bedroom, a little girl's bedroom? Why did nobody ask? Did your daughter come home? Was she home? We'd like to talk to her. That's all I want to know. I want to know why these questions weren't asked and if we can start to ask them now. I want justice for my stepfather. So if you can help, I would really appreciate it. There's a link in my on this YouTube for you to get in touch with me. He deserved justice. Nobody's life should be cut short that way.